Hey everybody, hope you had a great week. Hope you're having a great week and spending some time together and fellowshipping. So in the message, I talked about there were some sermon rabbit trails. What I meant by that is, there are some times where you're like, ooh, we could go off and we could talk about this. And that moment in the sermon was when Samuel, through his kind of judgment, divine judgment of not Samuel judging, but God judging through Samuel, his divine messenger, King Saul. And then there's this mention of he's been replaced with a man after God's own heart. And that talks about King David. And that's a sermon rabbit trail that we could talk a lot about, is how is Saul different than David? How do they both represent different postures of their hearts? And so I want you to take some time, maybe look over 1 Samuel chapter 13, verses 13 through 14, and maybe take some time and compare and contrast King Saul and then what you know of King David. Maybe someone in your group has some knowledge about what King David was like, and you can talk about that. You can talk about his being called a man after God's own heart. You could talk about his checkered relationship with God. Sometimes he did seem to act as if he was after God's own heart, and sometimes he seemed to act as if he was just like Saul. And so the first thing is an encouragement for you to pause this in just a moment and dig deeper into the comparison between King Saul and King David. The second thing I want to encourage you to talk about, and maybe even have a little fun with this, is do you agree that practicing here and now patience can help develop big picture patience? How have you seen that? What are some examples? Funny, serious, light, heavy, whatever it looks like. What are some examples of developing and practicing here and now patience? And do you think that can help develop big picture patience? Maybe talk about opportunities where you've had to practice big picture patience, whether successfully or unsuccessfully. So go ahead and talk about that. Here and now patience, maybe use some examples. And lastly, I want to encourage you as a group, however you're engaging in this, or as a family, or as a staff, or whatever you're doing, to kind of talk about and bask in the glory and dream about what the kingdom life will be like when patience is obsolete. What's that going to be like? Because that's a reality. That's an eternal reality where patience is not necessary anymore. Talk about what you think that kind of living, that kind of adventure, that kind of journey will be like. I love you guys. Have a great week. Have fun discussing these questions.